my channel. My name is Martine, and if you are new here, I do videos on Vedic astrology mainly, but also with some tropical insights, and I focus on both relationship and natal astrology. And if you like this video and you would like to see more content from me, please like, subscribe, hit the notifications bell to see when I will post a new video. And also, if you're interested in a personal consultation, I do consultations on a wide variety of topics. You can check out the video description. I will leave my contact information there. I also have a memberships option on my channel, and I have made a short video, which I also will be linking in the video description, if you want to get more details about what the membership options are and what they involve. And also, if you are interested in tarot, I also have a tarot channel, which I will be linking in the video description as well as in the pinned comment. And, go ahead, check it out. If you're interested, maybe subscribe. I would greatly appreciate it. And also, if you're interested in a private consultation, I do consultations on a wide variety of topics in astrology, and I also do tarot readings. You can check out the video description. I will leave my email address there. You can email me for a full list of reading options with the associated prices. All right. So today's topic is going to be about the Astro-Profile of Marilyn Monroe, as I have said previously on a community post. And I'm sorry that it has been delayed for a while because I have recently started a new job and it's taking me something like over 55 to 60 hours per week to focus on this job, so I really haven't had as much time as usual. But here I am, finally getting to it. So I am going to start, as usual, with a short introduction, although I don't think that Marilyn Monroe requires much of an introduction. I think most people know who she is, or rather who she was, because she has passed away quite a long time ago, I think in 1960-something, 1963. And at the age of 36. And she was possibly the biggest sex symbol in Hollywood history. She was a very famous actress. She was very much known for her sex appeal, her beauty, and actually starting the sexual revolution, as far as I have read in some sources. She was she was one of the figures that was at the forefront of, renouncing taboos around sexuality and, paving the path for the sexual revolution, basically. So, and yes, she was, very well known for her abilities as well as her beauty, her talents. She was a great actress. She was also a singer and a dancer. So a full artist, basically. And she was also known to have had a really sad childhood and basically growing up almost as an orphan. She had a mother who was in and out of psychiatric hospitals, and she didn't really have any kind of a connection with her father. She grew up without knowing who her father was. I think at some point later in life she did find out, but she never really had a relationship with her father. So she had a really rough childhood because she grew up in a series of foster homes, and also, dealing with a lot of insecurity, financial instability, and also, especially, emotional instability, because she kept changing foster homes, so she didn't have, any stable parent figures when she was growing up. And on top of that, there were some sources that said she was abused even sexually when she was growing up because of the foster care system and all this stuff. So in other words, she was kind of a rags to riches tale because she came from not a good position in life, really being not favored, but she was able to make the most of her gifts and eventually became a very successful artist, right? So I'm going to start by looking at her D1 chart for general life themes. And as you can imagine, one of the first things that I looked at was what I can pick up on with respect to her childhood. And the first thing that really stands out to me is the fact that she had Saturn in the 4th house, which would very much go hand in hand with the fact that she had a really rough childhood, as I said. So she didn't really have a lot of emotional support, and she really felt that as a huge lack in her life. And this is actually further reinforced by the fact that Saturn is opposite Venus in her natal chart. So, and she actually, funny enough, Venus is not just about love in general, also your ability to love yourself to some extent. Venus is also about self-esteem, and having Saturn, which is a really cold, harsh planet, aspecting Venus, shows that this is something that was affected in her life. And Saturn being in the fourth house shows that a large reason for this was her early childhood environment. So once again, the fourth house is about early childhood environment. It is especially the relationship with the mother, actually. The fourth house is the mother and the 10th is the father. These are one of the ways to read the relationships with your parents. There are other signifiers as well, but these are one of the main things. So the fourth house is your early childhood, the relationship to your mother, to your family of origin, and homeland as well to some extent. So having Saturn in the fourth house already kind of shows generally a pretty rough, cold environment, because Saturn is not a warm, loving planet. Saturn is about hardships, especially material hardships, suffering, frustrations, obstacles. So all of these things would have been felt very prominently by her as she was growing up. On the plus side, however, Saturn is exalted actually in her horoscope because it is in Libra. So this shows also that she has a lot of Saturnian qualities that worked out for the better eventually, because Saturn also means discipline, hard work, determination, and she has Saturn in Libra especially, and also aspecting Venus by opposition, which means that that's a mutual aspect between Venus and Saturn. They're linked, they're aspecting each other's energies. So this shows that there will be a conscious effort to developing Venusian qualities, and a lot of effort, a lot of discipline being put into Venusian qualities, which is of course about arts. And this is especially significant also in her horoscope because Venus is in the 10th house, which is the house of career and social status. So it all kind of falls into place. You're going to see that as I go along also with the Arudha Lagna and all that. Yeah, it's really, I mean, as usual, astrology is very telling when it comes to describing a person's entire existence and, you know, the paths, the decisions that they have made, the paths they were drawn to, and all of that. So yes, Saturn with Venus can be, you know, influencing a person on multiple planes. Like I said, one way that it works out is that it can influence a person's self-esteem, sense of self-worth negatively, right? Also, Venus is not in the strongest position being in Aries, which is basically the sign of its enemy. So if Venus had been in Pisces, or if it had been in Libra, I mean, obviously, if it had been in this signs, then it would no longer be opposite Saturn. But let's just say hypothetically, if Venus were in a better sign, in a better position, if let's say you would have had Saturn in Aries opposite Venus in Libra, then Venus would have been much stronger because Venus would have had kind of the upper hand being in its own sign, and Saturn would have been debilitated in Aries. But in this situation, you clearly see this theme of her self-esteem, her sense of attractiveness actually being wounded. And it's really funny because I do remember having seen a documentary about her a while ago, and she actually, I remember this one quote really stuck with me, that she said at some point that when she was a child, she felt she was invisible. And then also that she felt like she wasn't pretty when she was a girl. And she said something along the lines of people should always tell little girls that they're pretty, even if they're not pretty, because she always had a feeling of, you know, she wasn't noticeable enough. So clearly there was this effect of Saturn on her self-esteem and on her sense of, you know, am I beautiful? Am I attractive? Which in a woman's horoscope in anyone's horoscope actually, is especially seen by Venus, because Venus is about your ability to be attractive, to be seductive. You know, it's about being beautiful, especially. Venus is the number one signifier of beauty in general. And actually, you see this a lot of the times in the horoscopes of models and actresses, that they often have Saturn influencing either Venus or the moon, or sometimes both, as you see in her horoscope actually as well, because she also had moon in Capricorn. So Saturn is also influencing the moon. So you see this in her horoscope, and these placements are common in the charts of artists because they feel like they have to. First of all, Saturn shows what you're going to work on throughout your entire life. I also did a video a while ago where I talked about how Saturn is your life's work. And so just by looking at Saturn and the circumstances of Saturn in your horoscope, by sign, by house, by aspects, by nakshatra, you can get a really good sense of what are going to be lifelong themes of areas you're really going to put effort in, and conscious effort, things you really want to be good at. And especially whichever area Saturn touches will tend to show an area where you feel lacking, you feel self-conscious, you feel like, I need to work hard to get these things. They don't come easily to me. So it's really telling in her horoscope that she has Venus and Moon influenced by Saturn. And as I said, in general, actresses and models often will have Saturn to Venus, Saturn to Moon, because this shows that these women feel a very strong desire. I mean, I say women, but of course could also be men. But especially for women, because women really identify with their feminine energies in their horoscope, with the Venus and the Moon, generally, unless they do a lot of self-analysis and maybe they get into astrology or psychology, and then maybe they start to realize that, they have both masculine and feminine. Generally, most women will identify more with their feminine energy, with their Venus and their Moon energies, and all of the energies in a horoscope that they rule, they influence a lot more than the masculine. So, yes, Saturn influencing Venus shows that she will work on arts, but also that she will work on her beauty and her attractiveness throughout her lifetime, and which has certainly been true about her. I, again, remember seeing this documentary where it was clear that she was actually extremely disciplined, and she was very hardworking with respect to how she presented herself. There were these rumors that she was on a really crazy diet, that she ate no carbohydrates and, barely allowed herself to splurge every now and then because she wanted to keep her figure, and she also exercised. And, I remember, again, seeing in this documentary that there was some guy who was part of the studio system who talked about her and her discipline, and how when she first got her contract, she would wake up early in the morning and go through a lot of lessons and a lot of courses. Like, she would go horseback riding, she would go learning things like elocution and acting and all of these different things, like dancing lessons. So and this was, when she was very in the beginning, and she didn't even really have like stable work or anything. And this guy asked her at some point, why do you work so hard? Because like other actors, especially around her age, would slack, or they would be in bed at noon because they were drunk all night partying, and she would wake up at the crack of dawn. And she said something along the lines of, one day opportunity will knock, and like maybe one day opportunity will knock, and I hope to be prepared, or something like that. So clearly she was very hardworking, she was very disciplined, and her main drive was actually to become an artist. That was her main drive. And now there are a lot of people also who say clearly she wanted the fame as well. Certainly that was probably also an aspect, especially coming from a background where she didn't get a lot of attention, a lot of love, and all that. That probably was a part of her psychology. But my main point was she was very disciplined. She was very hardworking. And especially when it came to these topics of art, becoming a good artist. And there were even parts of her diary where she said, like, the only thing she wanted was to be an actress, like to have talent or something like that, to work on her craft. And also, in that effect, she also worked really hard on her image, on the way she presented herself. Everything was cultivated about her image, the way that she talked, the way she walked. The makeup took her a long time, then there was the hair and all that stuff. So yeah, all in all, she put a lot of effort into her achievements, even though maybe it seemed on the surface that, she was presenting this very kind of carefree, ditzy little blonde sort of image. She was actually very calculated and very driven. And you also see this with Moon and Dhanishta. I have also kind of talked about Dhanishta in a video. Again, I will be linking all of the related videos in the video description, so you can go check them out for more details. I have done a video on Mars's nakshatras where I talked a little bit more in depth about Dhanishta, the nakshatra of Dhanishta, which is ruled by Mars. And I also talked about how it is actually very much connected to artistic endeavors. And it's a nakshatra that is very driven. It's, very much connected to hard work. I mean, it is ruled by Mars. So as you would expect, Mars is a very straightforward, ambitious sort of energy, and they want to be first. They want to be the biggest and the best. And Dhanishta also is a nakshatra that is connected to great wealth, great fame. And unfortunately, there's also some kind of link to tragedy. I have talked about all of these themes more in depth in that video, so I'm not going to get too much here. But suffice it to say, there have been a few people with prominent Dhanishta nakshatras, especially the moon in Dhanishta, who reached huge heights of fame after they died. And another person actually is Lady Di, for instance, who also had, I think she had moon in Dhanishta, but I'm not 100% sure. But she had some prominent Dhanishta placement, and also she was very much well known. She was very famous throughout her life as well, but she became basically immortalized after her death. So you see the same theme here with Marilyn Monroe, quite tragic. But I won't get straight to the ending. Let me look at her horoscope, right? Another thing that stands out to me is, aside from the fact that I said this maybe directly or not directly, that her career very much, her life's work very much are connected to the arts, because you have Venus in the 10th house, no other planet there. You also have the aspect from Saturn, which shows a lot of conscious effort being put into, first of all, her career and her status, but at the same time towards artistic pursuits, because you have all of that Venusian energy on the 10th house axis. So aside from that, what you do see is the ruler of the 2nd house and the ruler of the 3rd house and the ruler of the 12th and 11th houses are falling in her 11th house, namely Sun and Mercury form a conjunction. So in her horoscope, she has Sun ruling the 2nd house and Mercury rules, I said the 11th house, but no, scratch the 11th house, because the 11th house is Venus. But yes, so Mercury rules the 12th house and the 3rd houses. So you have the ruler of the 2nd, 3rd, and 12th houses falling in her 11th house. Now, this could show, first of all, it shows that she has a great drive to succeed, because the 3rd house is about your willpower, your ambition, again, your conscious efforts. What are you putting your efforts towards? And the 11th house is very much connected to large audiences, large masses. And again, speaking of her life and documentaries I've seen about her, I do remember very strongly that there was a quote from her that said something like, "I always thought I would belong to the world because I never belonged to anyone in particular," or something like that. So she always had clearly this strong desire to be in front of an audience, in front of a public, to be admired and all this stuff. Clearly it is seen in her horoscope repeatedly. And Mercury also is about communication. So, and Mercury also kind of influences Rahu there, because Mercury rules Rahu. She has Rahu in Gemini. So she also has this desire. Rahu especially will show the ability to use media. And the 11th house in itself, by virtue of ruling large audiences in the 20th century and in the 21st century, and I'm sure for many years to come, it is very much connected to the media, because it's, the media is the way to reach large audiences. And so you have communication, you have intelligence, and also, by the way, the Sun and Mercury also shows this person has a very pure soul, because this is called something like a Buddha Ditya yoga. It doesn't really matter what it's called. It's a kind of yoga that, number one, blesses a person with a lot of intelligence. So clearly she was very smart. But it also shows that you have a tendency to be really pure in intentions, like really, kind-hearted, and you don't want to do anything wrong. You don't want to, do anything shady to anyone, because this is actually a placement of instant karma. So even if you are somehow tempted to step outside of the line, you basically will get, like the phrase goes, instant karma. You are going to be, punished for your bad deeds if you have this conjunction. But I don't think that in her horoscope, I mean, looking at the rest of her horoscope, she didn't have, probably she didn't have any kind of like evil bone in her body. I don't think so. But in any case, let me get more into the rest of the horoscope. Another thing that you see very prominently here is you have another thing that kind of goes hand in hand with her image of being a sex symbol, is the fact that she had Mars in the 8th house, and Mars rules the 10th house. Once again, the 10th house, which is the house of reputation, which is the house of how people view you in the world, what people recognize you for most in the world, is connected to the 8th house, which is the house of sexuality, of hidden things, of I've actually heard, I'm pretty sure that it was Kapil Raj at some point, and since then I've heard it from multiple sources that when you want to see people who make it big in the Hollywood, actually in particular, he said, you want to look for heavy 12th, 8th, and 4th houses, especially 8th and 12th, because supposedly these are connected to occult stuff. And I don't know what he was hinting at. I think he was like hinting at the idea that Hollywood is full of like rituals and eyes wide shut situations, and who knows, like it could be. I mean, at this point, I think everyone is just, like people no longer know what to believe. I think I said this at some point. I don't know if I said this in a video, but I said it at some point. I think like the older I get, the more I think that Rosemary's Baby was actually a documentary, or like it was based on a true story, based on some of the stories that have come out of Hollywood in, the past decade or the past few decades, of stories of, people eating babies and partaking in all kinds of weird rituals and stuff to gain power and popularity and all this. Who knows? I mean, again, I don't think that this was her case. It could be, I guess, again, I'm not excluding anything, or it could just literally be that she used her sexuality to get fame and attention, which was definitely true. Let's not also forget that the 8th house is also a house that shows sudden changes, and it also potentially shows controversy. And I don't know how many people know this, but she actually really got her main boost in her fame once there were those like naked pictures of her that leaked, that apparently showed up on the first cover of Playboy ever, and she actually didn't even make any money out of it, and the studio that she was working for wanted to let go of her because of those pictures, and instead she actually decided to not apologize about it and kind of realize that it was actually a good marketing thing, that there was a controversy going on around her name and that would get her more publicity, and that's actually what happened. So she kind of really rode that wave of controversy into getting more parts and being talked about and, slowly building a career. And that really seems to go hand in hand with 10th house being connected to the 8th house. And of course, Mars also rules the 6th house in her horoscope. The 5th house is even better in her horoscope. So the 5th house, of course, is connected to dramatic arts. It's connected to creative pursuits in general, but it's connected to dramatic arts, especially. So drama, arts, theater, acting, all of these things are very much 5th house. 5th house is the main signifier of these professions. So you also have the ruler of the 5th house also being connected to the 10th house. So her career is connected by the 8th and the 5th houses. So you have creativity and also controversy. And also, 8th house would give her, I'm pretty sure that when I did Rudolph Valentino's chart, he also had a similar placement. Either he had the ruler of the 8th house in the 10th or the ruler of the 10th in the 8th house. And Valentino, again, was pretty controversial throughout his lifetime. Sadly, he also, oh, by the way, this is another kind of a darker interpretation, because once again, remember, 10th house is the house of reputation and visibility to the world, the wide world, basically. So when you have connection between 10th and 8th, you could have a person who becomes really famous after death, or becomes even more famous after death. And this is, again, true for both Marilyn and Valentino. So there could have been an extra, how should I put it? An extra point in this direction that somehow she was meant to become famous after death, in addition to the fact that she also had Moon in Dhanishta, which pointed in the same direction, actually. But again, 8th house is about allowing people to project their sexual fantasies on you to a large extent, and the same thing happened with Rudolph Valentino. And actually, ironically, if I, again, remember from one of her documentaries, this maybe it was like the same one. I think I saw a couple of documentaries about her in my lifetime. And there was one documentary, again, where they mentioned that she was actually very much interested in Rudolph Valentino, that she actually at some point fancied the idea that she might be Valentino reincarnated, because he died in the same year that she was born, I think, 1926. So, and she would visit his grave or something. Like, it was really kind of weird. So, yeah, anyway, again, she was obviously someone who was very much fond of Hollywood, and she grew up kind of in that area. Her mother had worked for the studios, I think, in Hollywood. So she was probably just in love with the idea of acting and fame and glamour and all that stuff. Venus, again, is about glamour. Let's not forget that. It's about the soft life, quote unquote. So, yeah, all right, going back to the Mars situation, it's also interesting because she has Mars conjunct Jupiter. Now, having the ruler of your 10th house conjunct Jupiter, definitely great for boosting your reputation, your luck, your popularity. Jupiter is bound to give you that. It's bound to give you, widespread fame, especially since, again, in her horoscope, Jupiter rules the 9th house as well in her D1 chart, because this is what I'm looking at for the time being. So Jupiter is ruling the 9th house, which is the house of prosperity and blessings and joy and fulfillment, and it's connected to the 10th house. So to some extent, she was always bound to, I think, experience wide fame and success. So, and also Jupiter rules... So it rules the 9th house and the 6th house as well. So interesting. So 6th house is about enemies, competitions. I mean, it's also about being employed as well. So having a connection between the 6th and the 10th house can just show she wants to be of service, and she does well when it comes to finding employment, as opposed to being self-employed. But in her horoscope, she actually also has a pretty strong 3rd house. And she was actually the first actress, I think, who started her own production company. So she kind of juggled both of those things. So she was good at being an employee, but she also had an entrepreneurial spirit. She was quite self-motivated. With respect to her looks in general, she had ascendant in Ashlesha, which I have talked about. I think, again, I will be linking related videos in the video description. I did a video a while ago where I talked about physical appearance and how different configurations in the horoscope can affect the physical appearance, and also differences between actual physical appearance and the energy that you project in the world, or that you allow others to project on you. So having a Ashlesha on the ascendant would definitely give a plus in the area of her coming across as seductive and sexy. And, Ashlesha is very kind of hypnotic in energy. It's connected to Nagas, which are kind of like a snake-like deity. So Ashlesha is very much connected to having a graceful body and being good at dancing, and having also, by the way, a very high intelligence, because it's ruled by Mercury. So she definitely had that. And again, if you look at the ruler of the ascendant here, which is an Ashlesha, which is Mercury, the ruler of her ascendant is Mercury. Again, it falls in the 11th house conjunct the sun. So again, this shows that at some point in her life path, she would be met with huge fame. touching wide audiences and getting a lot of glory and a lot of visibility because you have the sun there. So the sun is about illuminating everything that it touches. Whenever you have sun connected to, either the first house or the 10th house, it shows people who are going to have mass visibility, right? There are people going to be recognizable. They're going to stand out in some way. And again, this is very much true for her. Another thing that is really interesting to me is that Saturn is her Atmakaraka. Now, again, I have mentioned this in another video, but I don't remember which one, to be honest, because I did a lot of them. I have mentioned this, that when you have a malefic as an Atmakaraka, it tends to show a really rough life path. So it's like, don't be jealous about people who reach mass fame, but they have Saturn as Atmakaraka. And certainly this has turned out to be true for her. She had a very difficult life path. She came from, financial instability, emotional instability. She actually never had a lot of money. I mean, compared to what you would imagine for a star of her level of fame. I remember again in the documentaries that I saw about her that she was oftentimes underpaid because she didn't come from, she didn't come from connections. She didn't have, as people, I guess, probably exploited her situation, that they knew she didn't have a family or something. This, as it usually happens, even in today's world, right? It's like if people find out that you don't have connections or you don't have a strong backup plan, they think they can underpay you because you're not going to have anywhere to go anyway. So she was actually, I remember again in the documentary that I saw that she struggled to get her own something like her trailer on set. They wouldn't give her own trailer, so I don't even know where she was doing her thing if she didn't have her own trailer. And this was already when she was quite famous, so she was bringing in a lot of money for the studio that she was working for, but she wasn't getting as much respect, she wasn't getting as much money. So and also despite the fact that, again, she was very famous, she did make eventually decent, definitely well above average amounts of money. She never really, cared much about expanding her wealth. She was always kind of humanitarian and focused on arts and just life in general. And she only had like one property throughout her life, as far as I remember. And so Saturn is Atmakaraka is one of those planets that will show you have a rough path in life, a lot of challenges, a lot of suffering, a lot of frustration. And for her, the suffering was also to a large extent caused by the fact that she wanted children, but she never really had them. And she actually, aside from that, she also had a painful gynecological condition, so that made her periods very painful and all this stuff. So that was actually why she was not able to have a child, because something about the pregnancy became more difficult with that condition. I think it's endometriosis, but I'm not 100% sure. Maybe she had multiple problems, I'm not sure. But yes, so Saturn, and also her Amatya Karaka, the planet with the second highest degree, is Mars, which is really interesting. So this shows that she went after what she wanted with sheer willpower and determination. Because again, I have explained this in another video. I will try to find it and post it in the description, where I talked about how the Amatya Karaka is the main thing you want to achieve in this lifetime, and the Atma Karaka, so the planet with the highest degree in your natal chart, is what you want to achieve in this lifetime. And the planet with the second highest degree, this is minus Ketu or Rahu, so only one of the 7 planets from Sun to Saturn can be your Atma Karaka, or any kind of Karaka actually. So yes, if you have, right, what I was going to say is that the Atmakaraka is the main thing you want to achieve, and the Amatya Karaka shows how you're going to achieve it, the main qualities that you're going to rely on to achieve your life's destiny. So for her, having Mars as Amatya Karaka just shows that she relied on sheer willpower and determination, just pushing herself forward in order to achieve what she wanted. So, another thing that I wanted to say, let me think. Having Mars and Jupiter aspecting her second house, this shows that the face is also influenced by these energies, by Mars, Jupiter, and also the ruler of the second house is the Sun conjunct Mercury. So the main energies that influence the face, actual physical appearance of the face, are Sun, Mercury, Mars, Jupiter. So that's quite a lot of energies. But they do give some hints here. And mainly, it's the fact that she looked youthful throughout her life. So she has Mercury aspecting the second house, which is, again, the house of the face. And Mercury is about youthfulness and having kind of an inverted triangle-shaped face, you know, where the face is heavier on the top and has like a slim jawline. So she very much would fit that description. And you can see that from here, Mercury influencing the second house. Also, the Sun, again, influencing the second house just shows that you have features that really stand out, or a face that really stands out, which again was very true for her. You know, kind of, maybe even kind of prideful kind of appearance. Also, lighter features, you know, lighter complexion, light eye color, light hair, and all that, or at least these things will look good on you. And Mars and Jupiter will show, again, strong features, and Mars especially can show, again, kind of a tendency towards sultriness and sexiness as well, because it's Mars. It's one of the planets of sexuality. And but it also shows strong features, Mars and Jupiter can show rather an elongated oval face, and it also shows, both the Sun and Jupiter can show having a great smile. And she was definitely known for, one of the things that was remarkable about her was her smile. I mean, everything was kind of remarkable about her appearance, but her smile was, again, very recognizable, very attractive, and all that. So let's look a little bit at her love life situation. First of all, the ruler of the 7th house is Saturn, and it's falling in the 4th house. This will show that her partner, first of all, this tends to show that the circumstances surrounding meeting the romantic partners have to do with 4th house. So this could be real estate, this could be restaurants, vehicles. So honestly, I haven't done a very strong research on this, like exactly how she met her partners. But yeah, 4th house would, at the very least, 4th house will show that she meets her romantic partners in her homeland, as opposed to, you know, let's say exotic travels or something like that. And it also can show, again, that you meet the partner somewhere, either literally like close to your home, or you could be meeting them in some circumstances connected with vehicles, maybe even traffic, and or restaurants as well, or anything to do with real estate. So that's something that shows. Another thing is she has Moon in the 7th house, which shows a lot of ups and downs, really. And it also tends to show that the kind of partners that she attracted were kind of feminine in nature, which is particularly interesting if you bear in mind what I have said in, I think, the last video that I posted on my channel. Again, I will be linking that in the video description as well, because if you are attracted to men who have feminine energies, you might attract chauvinists more than you imagine. And I think, unfortunately, this was true for her, because I think probably most of the men that had anything to do with her had a kind of mixture of love and hate towards her, because she was someone who was so famous that no man could really possess her entirely. So obviously that would lead to jealousy and all kinds of issues. But Moon in the 7th house specifically would show that her partners are kind of wishy-washy, they're going back and forth, they're moody, they're changeable. And on top of that, her Dharkaraka, which is the planet with the lowest degree, and it's the planet that shows the spouse archetype, is Jupiter in her horoscope, and Jupiter is conjunct Mars. Now, normally, Mars and Jupiter are friends, so, I mean, they get along pretty well together. However, Mars is still inherently a malefic influence, and it has to do with aggressiveness and having a bad temper and being selfish and kind of macho. So this would go hand in hand, because her, at least, I mean, I don't know exactly. I know she was married 3 times, right? The first time was she was very young, and it almost doesn't count because she just got married because she didn't have anywhere to stay or something and got divorced very quickly. And then she married, I think her second husband was Joe DiMaggio, who was a famous baseball player, and he actually was physically abusive towards her, according to many sources. If not physically, at least, emotionally, psychologically. So that would kind of be shown, this kind of volatility would kind of be shown through her configurations here. Also, on top of this, add the fact that Jupiter and Mars are sitting in the 8th house, which is, again, a house of sudden changes and a lot of tumultuousness in general. So, yes, there's that. And the moon, which shows kind of waxing and waning and going back and forth, kind of makes me, moon in love, let's say, or with respect to a love interest, kind of gives me that vibe of Katy Perry's Hot and Cold song. You're hot and you're cold, something like that. I don't remember what the lyrics were, but you get the drift, I think. So yeah, someone who can change their mind. So today they love you, tomorrow they don't, or something like that. And this again would kind of show the relationship she had with Arthur Miller later on as well. I think that was her last husband, I'm pretty sure. And Arthur Miller was a playwright, and he was quite well known as well. But certainly he boosted his fame by marrying her. So, and the news that was spread about them was that Arthur Miller was actually quite the jerk, and kind of not only used her to get more attention and also to avoid some kind of investigations about being a communist, but also that he actually didn't really respect her. I think there was this stuff about how she came across his diary and he had written horrible things about her. And, he even wrote the screenwriting for a movie that she was in and didn't portray her very well. So there were all these kind of shady stuff. There's this shady stuff happening with this guy who was supposed to be her husband and basically supportive and all that. So he wasn't much of a support system. And with Jupiter being in Aquarius conjunct Mars, this is kind of a so-and-so position with respect to the kind of support that you get from men throughout your life, or specifically your long-term partners. I have talked about this again in another video where I talked about how Jupiter is the husband archetype in a woman's life, and how Jupiter, the conditions of Jupiter, the sign that it's placed in, and what aspects are happening there, can basically determine the level of support that you will get from your spouse. And in the D1 chart especially, it just shows general support. How much support will the husband give you throughout this life, or the partner? So, her position is like so-and-so, I would say. All right, so she does have a plus because Jupiter is with Mars there, maybe. Even though Mars is inherently kind of dark, so this is why I think it's kind of somewhere in the middle. It's like, yeah, sure, her partners could have helped her out materially, maybe, and been there for her in case of an emergency, but they were also volatile other times. So, yeah, it's kind of a mix and match. And also she had Rahu in the 12th house aspecting the Jupiter and the Mars conjunction. So this would have added a little bit more of a tendency to be with people who are narcissistic or materialistic, self-involved, because Rahu tends to show, I would say, narcissists of all kind, right? All kinds. So it doesn't really show a lot of soulfulness or sensitivity when it comes to the spouse archetype. Another thing that I would say is, now that it stood out to me, is she has Mars aspecting the Sun, and she has Rahu aspecting Saturn in the 4th house. So this would have further emphasized the fact that her parents were not exactly good figures to have around. And, especially with Rahu aspecting the 4th, that would have shown, again, kind of a materialistic parent, or unstable parents, unstable early life environment, which certainly was the case with her. But then Mars aspecting the 3rd house by 8th aspect would have given her even more willpower and determination to succeed. So yeah, also Mars in the 8th house in general just shows that she is very determined. I think this is also kind of a Mongolic position. So it shows a person who just has a strong sexuality, strong interest in sexuality. Now, of course, this doesn't necessarily mean that, I don't know, it's going to be everything sunshine and rainbows in that department, but it does show higher than average, sexual energy and interest in sexuality, which definitely would show in her life. And another thing that stands out to me is that she also had Mars in Purva Bhadrapada, which would have, again, added to kind of a sexiness and a tendency for people to, kind of project their fantasies, including maybe dark fantasies on her. Depending on the situation, you want or you don't want this, but for her being a public person, it definitely helped her to ride on that image of, the sex symbol that would have added to the situation. I have talked about Purva Bhadrapada more in depth in Jupiter's Nakshatras, the video that I did about Jupiter's Nakshatras. And I did mention there that actually Purva Bhadrapada by other astrologers, and this is not necessarily my original idea, I've heard this being said that Purva Bhadrapada is compared to Ashlesha in terms of having that same kind of connection to sensuality, and the only difference is that Purva Bhadrapada is even a touch more towards, dark stuff, like, I don't know, taboo subjects, taboo sexuality, and it has kind of like a bewitching sort of influence, and especially being an Aquarius. By the way, having Mars conjunct Jupiter in Aquarius, again, would have definitely helped to connect to the masses, basically. And Jupiter is also in Dhanisha Nakshatra in her horoscope, so more in the direction of mass fame and popularity. Yeah, that's there. Okay. Also, another thing, last but not least, is that she has Mercury, Mercury is the ruler of her ascendant. And it falls in, not just in the 11th house, as I said initially, which definitely would boost, again, popularity, touching the masses. And this is connected to her main life path because it's the Lord of the Ascendant. But more specifically, it's falling in Rohini Nakshatra, again, conjunct Sun, which is also in Rohini Nakshatra. And again, I talked more about Rohini in the video where I did the moon's nakshatras. And I said there how Rohini is actually very much connected to the arts, and many people who are born in tropical Gemini are actually Sun in Rohini, and that's why you see a lot of Gemini, a lot of quote-unquote Gemini, according to the traditional Western zodiac, being famous and in show business, because they actually have a lot of Rohini influence. And Rohini is also about arts, it's about beauty, it's about creativity, but it's also about beauty and being known for your beauty. And in her situation, again, you have the Lord of the Ascendant and the Lord of the 2nd house and the Lord of the 3rd house, which, by the way, is also the house of the voice and the communication style. The 2nd and the 3rd are actually connected to the voice and communication style. And you have all of these falling in Rohini, which is about beauty and being attractive and being well known. So the 2nd house, especially being influenced by Rohini, would show that she was very attractive. Her face was very beautiful and nice to look at. And remember, I mentioned this in that video that Rohinis are also, by the way, known to be good dancers, but they're also very much known for their eyes. Like, their eyes are usually the most attractive feature on their face. So, and again, for her, I would say, again, debatable, but she definitely had really beautiful eyes as well, in addition to everything else that she had going for her. Yeah, so I would say, again, falling hand in hand with, it's falling into place with the rest of her horoscope. All right, so this is pretty much what I can say. Obviously, I could probably say a lot more, but I don't want to spend too long on this one horoscope analysis. So this is pretty much the main themes that I can see from her D1 chart. And I want to talk a little bit about her divisional charts as well, a little bit, because remember that the divisional charts never contradict the D1 chart. They just give you more details. Or, yeah, I mean, okay, maybe not never. Maybe I shouldn't say never. Maybe sometimes you will see small contradictions, but generally the D1 will stay valid throughout your lifetime. So even though you see people saying stuff like, the Navamsa will become more prominent after midlife or after marriage, that doesn't mean that the D1 becomes completely wiped out and now you become the D9. The D1 is still there. It's still the base tone of your existence, basically. It's just that the D9 and all the other divisional charts can give you more details about your life's direction. So looking at the D9 situation, she has ascendant in Capricorn, in Uttara Ashadha Nakshatra, which is really interesting because this again is a nakshatra that is ruled by the sun. And remember, sun is the energy that is most connected to dramatic arts because it is the ruler of Leo. It's all about standing out and, attracting attention and being bold and brave and all that. It's also connected to the heart chakra, the sun, I mean. So in Uttara Ashadha, she would have a stronger reinforcement of these themes throughout her life and also just the ability to stand out. And in my experience, Uttara Ashadha, which by the way, I have again talked about this in another video, which I will be linking in the description, that the ascendant in the D9 and as well as the rest of the planets in the D9 also influence your appearance. Maybe not as much as the D1, but they do. Like they might actually give you more of a hint on how your appearance will develop over time. But it also just influences through sheer energy, the energy that you give off. So it's like, if you look at two people's horoscopes, let's say, and both of them have ascendant in Ashlesha, like Marilyn Monroe, but one of them has ascendant in Jyeshta in the D9, and the other one has ascendant in Purva Falguni in the D9, you're going to have two different energies, actually. So the base tone is still going to be there, like the first layer of the appearance of the first things that people pick up on you are going to be given by the D1 ascendant. But if you want to get more subtle, like the energies that are showing and the way that you come through, especially again past marriage or past midlife, because the D9 becomes especially active after that, you can also look at these ascendants to determine a person's appearance. So she has Uttara Ashadha, so that would give her kind of this cool appearance, this kind of a cool, detached appearance. Uttara Ashadha is actually connected to a priestly energy, and it is the only nakshatra out of the 27 that does not have a counterpart when it comes to yoni compatibility. So this shows how this nakshatra is kind of like very spiritual, very kind of, a head above the rest when it comes to spiritual understanding and maturity. So I, would definitely think that she was well above average in intelligence, and that's why she managed to reach the level of fame and success that she did with as little advantages in life as she had. So yes, that would confirm it. And then what you also see is that really catches my eye is the moon falling in the 8th house of the Navamsa. I have talked about this in a video where I talked about manipulation, that when you see moon in the 8th house of the Navamsa, these, especially for women, because there were differences, especially during her time, there were differences between how men and women were treated as usual, but especially in her time. So women with moon in the 8th of the Navamsa can be extremely manipulative. They are masterminds of manipulation. They know how to plot strategies and how to make the most of what they have. So that definitely would have come in handy with respect to how she had to navigate through life, because again, she didn't have like connections and all that. And also, moon is in Purva Falguni Nakshatra. This was kind of baffling to me because at some point I remember that she had moon in Ashlesha in the Navamsa, so I think I remembered wrong, because this time I checked and double checked, and she definitely had moon in Purva Falguni, not in Ashlesha, but it makes just as much, if not even more sense that her moon would be in Purva Falguni. Again, I have talked about Purva Falguni as a nakshatra in the video I did on Venus's nakshatras. I talked about how this nakshatra is very sensuous. It's very much connected to sensual pleasures, and it's actually even sometimes known as the nakshatra of the courtesan or the prostitute, in a maybe not the nicest words, but because it is so connected to bed pleasures. In fact, the symbols connected to Purva Falguni are the bed, one of them. Yeah, I think it's the main one. I'm not even sure if there are other ones. I know that Purva Shadha is the fan. But yeah, I think for Purva Falguni mainly it's the bed. So, and these people can actually be can have a tendency towards laziness, that is true, but Purva Falguni is also a nakshatra that again is very connected to arts, to the art world, to creativity, to singing and dancing and acting and all of these things. And again, many artists have strong, prominent Purva Falguni energy in their horoscopes. So this definitely would go hand in hand with the way that her life progressed. And again, the moon in the Navamsa, as far as I have noticed, is especially strong, and especially for women, again, because women tend to identify more with their feminine energy. It's very strong. It's very strong in determining your way of thinking, your way of navigating through life, your interests, what you go for, and all of this stuff, right? So having moon in Purva Falguni would definitely again add, and again in the 8th house, would definitely add to the fact that she was a very sensuous person and who used her sexuality a lot, and her body and her beauty and all of that. It's definitely seen here. And another thing is, you see the Sun and Mars and Saturn falling in the 6th house. So the 6th house, again, could show what she did on a regular basis. And the Sun being there, again, is connected to dramatic arts. And let me see, the Mars is ruling the 11th house. So again, you have the 11th house connected to the 6th house, which is the house of work. And you have the 1st and the 2nd house ruler, which is Saturn, also being thrown in there into the mix. So again, her work was about being a public figure because the 1st house is there. So the 1st house is about standing out, being known for your appearance, your beauty, your body, right? People recognize you. And also the 2nd house could be about the voice. And also, by the way, she had a very recognizable voice. She had a very particular way of expressing herself. And certainly, and she was also, known for singing as well. And so she definitely made the most of everything that she had in creating this very artistic persona, this very, very complete artist, really, who was active on multiple planes. She even wrote little poems and all this stuff, but I don't think she published anything in her lifetime. But she was a true artist. She was someone who was very much interested in arts and beauty and all this. And in fact, again, there was another famous quote from hers where she said something like, "I don't care about money, I just want to be wonderful," or something like that. Or, "I don't care about fame, I just want to be wonderful." So it was all about the art of living and, creating beauty and all of that and being charming. So, and also, let's see, she had Rahu conjunct Mercury in the 5th house. And again, you see this really strong energy in the 5th house. By the way, having Mercury, Rahu, and Venus in the 5th house shows a tendency to have a lot of relationships, because Mercury and Venus, again, are together, would show a tendency to be, let's say, scattered when it comes to your romantic interests. It shows a tendency to have multiple affairs. And with Rahu there, again, it shows an even stronger desire to experience a lot of love affairs, a lot of pleasure as well, hedonism, because Venus is hedonism and pleasures of all kind. And Rahu being conjunct this definitely shows that this is something that she wanted to experience. And again, being connected to the 5th house shows she really loved acting. She loved being center stage. And this was basically the theme of her entire life because she wanted to be an actress from a very young age, So yes, it's very much shown here in her horoscope. On top of this, the 10th house, once again, is ruled by Venus. So you see this energy of Venus aspecting the 10th house in her Navamsa as well. And again, it is ruled by Venus, and it is falling in the 5th house, and it's conjunct Rahu and Mercury. This is, and by the way, Venus conjunct Rahu is one of those influences that can show high levels of fame in a person's horoscope. So yes, this would definitely, but unfortunately, it also shows troubles with relationships because it tends to show a person who, wants to experience different kinds of relationships, and it's like they can be flighty, they can get easily bored, and they also just want a lot of hedonism, and they want the soft life, quote unquote. I definitely see this in her horoscope, that she actually, despite having a lot of inner strength and determination, you definitely see a lot of Venus energy here. So there's this strong energy of wanting to enjoy the finer things and beauty and arts and all of this. These were the main drives in her life, really. And not only that, but another strong theme that is repeating is the fact that, again, she has the Lord of the 9th house being conjunct the Lord of the 10th house in the D9 as well. If you look at this closely, she has, so Venus, ruler of the 10th house, is conjunct Mercury, which is the ruler of the 9th house, because the 9th house falls in Virgo. And it's also the ruler of the 6th house, which again speaks of what you do on a regular basis, like your job, your routines, and all that. So there's this very strong hint that her career was very much meant to be focused on having mass fame and, being into an artistic field. Also use of communication and media. Rahu, let's not forget, is very much connected to media once again, because it's all about technology, and she was one of the earliest, not one of the earliest, but she was probably at the height of Hollywood, the glamour days of Hollywood. She was one of the biggest stars, so she definitely reached that high fame level in her life, and through the media, becoming a movie star, being known on camera. All right, so these are the main themes that I can pick up on from her D9 chart. Let me look a little bit at the D10, and again, it's easy to see, like you can see the main influences right off the bat. Again, if you look at the D10, the first thing that stands out to me is the fact that she has the sun in the 10th house of the D10. So and again, she has the ruler of the 10th house in the 9th house. So once again, this is the third time that you have a connection between the 10th house and the 9th house, which again, 9th house is all about blessings and good luck and fame and recognition and all that. So again, she was born to be famous, I would say. And you're also having, once again, you see the ruler of the ascendant. So the ascendant is falling in Virgo. And the ruler of the ascendant, which is Mercury, is once again conjunct Venus and also conjunct Moon. So this shows, again, clearly her path was about the arts. It was about an artistic field. The sun in the 10th of the D10 would also show that this person is meant to reach a level of authority in their field. So a huge level of recognition, because the sun is basically in its strongest position, really, in the 10th house, one of its strongest positions. So, it's happy to be here. It's happy to be in the place of recognition. And another thing is you also have the moon again. So the moon could also show ups and downs. So she did have some ups and downs in her career as well, with respect to, maybe sometimes getting more work than other times. And surely when she was starting out, she had some struggles. But overall, the energies are very positive. And also Jupiter here in the 7th house would also give a very strong tendency to work with someone else. And acting, to me, is all about working with other people, basically, because it's all about maintaining relationships, right? It's not like you can be an actor and not be in a, I mean, just the very fact of acting in a movie, you're acting in an ensemble, right? Or in a theater. So this would show definitely a desire that she wants to bounce off someone else, in her interactions at work. Basically, she needs to have an audience, she needs to have a dialogue, she needs to have this other person. Like, she could also want to go into business partnerships a lot, which I think was true again for her throughout her life. I think she was collaborating with particular photographers, and I don't even know exactly about, oh yeah, I think even her production company, I think she was started that with someone else as well. So that would be shown by the seventh house here being activated by Jupiter as well, and also luck with business partners. And also when you see, with the D10, Jupiter being here in a healthy position could also show that men have helped her career, which, well, they have in the long term. I mean, overall, they have, even though individual relationships that she has had maybe turned sour and were even downright abusive. Overall, basically, men made her career because that was the main audience that she attracted. And another thing that you see here with Mars being in the third house, once again, in Scorpio, by the way, once again reinforces the idea that this person has a very strong willpower, very strong determination to succeed and work hard and do whatever it takes to succeed, basically. And also Mars is opposite the Venus, Moon, Mercury conjunction in Taurus, which involves the ruler of her ascendant as well, the ruler of her 10th house as well as the ruler of her, her 9th house and 2nd house and the 11th house again, which is the house of gains. So great combination really for fame, for gains, for riches and everything that you want in career. Yes, definitely. And yeah, she was also meant to be in the public eye. Clearly, this is not a person who was like meant to work in the shadows from the beginning. You're able to see that. And Saturn, which is the Karaka of the D10 chart, is falling in the 11th house. Again, you have that 11th house activation, which is actually good for Saturn. It shows again that this person has the ability to touch the masses, to become very visible, basically. And right, last but not least, I also wanted to look at her Arudha Lagna chart because I think it's really interesting. I think I have talked a little bit, maybe I have, maybe I haven't, I'm not sure, or I wanted to talk about it. I'm talking about it right now, okay. And again, I'm going to be linking the playlist where I talked about Arudha Lagna. I have multiple videos on the topic, including a video on how you want to calculate it. It's quite short. On how you're supposed to calculate it and what it stands for, because I'm not going to get in all the theories now. I also went through a rundown of Arudha Lagna in all of the signs, so I think that's quite in-depth and explains a lot about your separate Arudha Lagna situations. But this is her situation, so I'm going to start by how I calculated it, because she has one of those exceptions. The exceptions are when the ruler of the ascendant falls in the 1st or the 7th house. Technically, this is not supposed to happen. Now, some astrologers don't take these exceptions into account. I have gone back and forth between taking them and not taking them into account. Eventually, I settled on taking them into account because I found that you get a lot more accurate predictions by taking them into account. So, yes, for those of you who don't know, from the beginning, the Arudha Lagna is calculated by looking at where the Lord of the Ascendant is placed, the Ascendant sign, and calculating. So let's say that you find your Ascendant is in Cancer, like in her situation. Let's say if the Lord of her Ascendant had been in Virgo, so the moon had been in Virgo, you would have calculated 3 places from Virgo and you would have gotten to Scorpio, and that would have been her Arudha Lagna. So you basically want to calculate as long, the same distance from the ascendant to the ascendant lord is then calculated from the ascendant lord to the Arudha Lagna sign. But like I said, there are these exceptions where it cannot fall in the 7th or the 1st house signs. So in her situation, she has Moon in the 7th house in Capricorn, and you would have to calculate according to the rule 7 places, because from the ascendant to Capricorn, you have 7 places, right? That's because Cancer and Capricorn are opposite signs. So you would have to calculate 7 places, and you would go back to the ascendant, basically. So according to the traditional rule, the ascendant would have been her Arudha Lagna, except you can take the ascendant as the Arudha Lagna. And instead, what you do is you add another 10 placements from where the Arudha Lagna has fallen, and you add another plus 10, and that's the actual Arudha Lagna. So in this situation, you take Cancer plus 10, you get to Aries, right? So you get to her 10th house. If her Arudha Lagna by the traditional calculation would have fallen in Capricorn, then her Arudha Lagna would have been in Libra. All right, this is just a short, explanation of how you calculate it. So her Arudha Lagna, as I have marked here on this chart, fell in Aries. And again, what do you see? First thing there is Venus falls in Aries, right? So, and also she has the Venus-Mars opposition. Saturn opposition. You have Saturn in the 7th from the Arudha Lagna. So these planets would have been prominent in her image, right? So Venus in the Arudha Lagna is definitely great for someone who wants to be in the limelight in an artistic field. Because again, Venus is about beauty, sensuality, all of this stuff. It's arts. So when you have Venus in the Arudha Lagna, people will naturally see you as someone who can be in the limelight, who can be very artistic, creative, and all that. So, and also with her project on you sexually, which again comes with all the positives and the negatives that comes from. Also, having Arudha Lagna in Aries can show that this person is a pioneer of something. And in her situation, she was kind of a pioneer. She was a pioneer of, again, renouncing the taboos connected to sexuality. So she was a pioneer in arts in some ways, in the sense that nobody up until her was as sensuous on screen and as captivating and used her body, her sexiness as much as she did. And like I said, I think, if I remember correctly, her nude pictures were like in the first copy of Playboy ever sold. So she was very much known for her sensuality and her beauty. And I talked about this in the video that I did on physical appearance. And I also talked about the Arudha Lagna versus the actual Lagna or the ascendant, that with the Arudha Lagna, the energies that influence it have to do with how people recognize you, the kind of energies that people immediately associate you with. So if you have Venus there, or Mars not so much, but Venus, especially for a woman, people can project their sexual fantasies on you because you really are very sensuous, very attractive. So people will just notice your beauty, right? So even if you are not the most beautiful person naturally, you can really cultivate that image of beauty if you have Venus in the Arudha Lagna, or in the 7th of from the Arudha Lagna as well, because from the 7th, Venus is also looking at the Arudha Lagna, but especially if it's actually sitting in the Arudha Lagna. There are many actresses actually who have Venus in the Arudha Lagna. If I remember correctly, Jennifer Lopez also has this. So a lot of actresses and or singers who have really been known for their beauty, their looks, their sensuality, their bodies, can have Venus strongly influencing the Arudha Lagna. All right. So another thing that stands out, again, I'm not going to go through like a full analysis because that would take me forever, but another thing that stands out to me is that the 9th house, and remember I talked about this in the Arudha Lagna series, the 9th from the Arudha Lagna shows the kind of people that will give you the most support in life. People who can boost your image, who, people that will open you, that will receive you with open arms, basically, who support you, who can bring you benefits in life. And in her situation, she has the 9th house in Sagittarius. So the ruler is Jupiter. And Jupiter, as you can see, is conjunct Mars in the 11th from the Arudha Lagna. So this can actually show that, like I said with the previous horoscope, that men really made her career, because Jupiter, first of all, Jupiter in itself is a masculine energy, but Jupiter is more of a tame energy. And if it were just Jupiter there, this could have just meant, I don't know, religious people or people who are philosophers or something. But with conjunction to Mars, this shows that men, especially young men, really helped her career, helped her in life in general, because Mars is about male peers. It's about men in general, especially men who are unmarried, basically. So young men generally. So this definitely shows, because young men in general obviously were probably her main audience and the ones who boosted her popularity, her fame. And Jupiter also, to some extent, especially for a woman, can be seen as the husband archetype as well. But in her situation overall, also having in view the D1 situation, the D1 and the D9, I haven't looked at it so much, but the D1, the question of how much her husband's actually helped her in life is more of a bittersweet situation. So it's kind of like, you know, she got some and she lost some from her relationships with her spouses. But yes, the relationship with men in general as a collective was pretty good and helped to boost her image and her career. So, and again, this is important, and I mentioned this in those series as well, that if you want to be successful, basically you want to go where you are wanted, right? Because let's say if she had ninth from the Arudha, let's say in Capricorn, she would have been favored by, I don't know, the state institutions, people who are serious, older, more mature, people who are maybe underprivileged. So she wouldn't have gotten as far by portraying her sexuality as much and her sensuality, because having her Arudha Lagna the way that she did, the fact that she dressed and acted for male audiences really boosted her overall fame and success. Yeah, as you can see, because the ninth from the Arudha is influenced by Mars. And she also has Moon in the 10th from the Arudha Lagna. Again, this would show that there is a career connected to, feminine things, imaginative things. An image that is very much connected to femininity, to imagination, to softness. As opposed to anything masculine or hard work or anything like that, Also, you see that the ruler of the third house and the second house are in the second house and connected to Sun. So again, her voice, like I said, very recognizable, probably added to her fame. She was mostly pleasantly seen because of her voice. This is what you can see from the Sun and Mercury being in the second house. Again, the enemy class, see, the opposite from Mars is, I think, so young women were her enemies, which, I mean, again, I'm sorry, sad to say, but probably made sense, especially during the time when she lived, that women would have been very catty towards her, especially in her profession, because, like I said, also in those series, the sign on the 7th from the Arudha Lagna shows people who are your direct opposition or open enemies, quote unquote, people who confront you directly or tell you to your face that they don't like you. See, here's the thing with her horoscope. See, young women, which basically means women who are not mothers, would have been her direct enemies or direct competition. And basically people who would have told her to her face that, I don't like you or something like that. But on the other hand, what you see is the 12th house, which is hidden enemies. The 12th from the Arudha is in Pisces, which again is ruled by Jupiter, which again leads back to Mars. So this also shows the bittersweet relationship that she has had with not just her husbands, but probably men in general that she encountered throughout her life, where men both hated her and desired her. So it could have very well turned out that some men who seemed like they were on her side actually turned out to be enemies in disguise. And that would be explained by, again, 12th house, which is hidden enemies being influenced by Mars and Jupiter. And now I'm going to get to the not not the coolest part. So again, if you don't want to sit through this, I'm going to mention this because I'm going to go into potential circumstances of death. And if you don't want to sit through it, again, my recommendation is don't sit through it, because you could be influenced by this, especially if you see that you have similar configurations. I speak from personal experience because I have underestimated how much this can influence me. And once I have gotten into understanding my circumstances of death, I became, pretty... I mean, I wouldn't say paranoid, but, I'm more aware, more conscious, more, about potential circumstances of death, and to the point where I'm nervous about putting myself in certain circumstances, right? So I'm just giving a fair warning here that if you don't want to sit through it, then don't sit through it. So, all right, if you are still here, so let me get into the circumstances of death. If you know from I actually, again, did a video specifically about how the Arudha Lagna can show circumstances surrounding a person's death. And I talked about how mainly it's about the third house from the Arudha Lagna, which shows circumstances surrounding this person's demise. But it's also about the Arudha Lagna itself, planets influencing the Arudha Lagna, or the seventh, because any planet that is in the seventh house can also influence the Arudha Lagna itself. But the circumstances mainly are shown by the third from the Arudha Lagna. Now, the first thing that stands out here is that she had Rahu in the third house from the Arudha Lagna. And I know that there was a lot of controversy about her death. And I actually, again, remember in one of the videos or documentaries that I've seen about her life, that there were, one of her maids, I think, came out years after her death and swore that, something very shady happened there. That, in fact, one of the people who I think was her doctor even, who arrived, was the first or the second to arrive at the death, her home after she had passed, actually may have precipitated her death by, I think, like stabbing her with a syringe in the chest or something like that, something really messed up. So there was a lot of controversy. There were a lot of rumors and everything, because she had been involved with the Kennedys, secret affairs and all this stuff. So there were all these rumors that she was murdered. Honestly, I couldn't say 100% either way, but it is possible, because you have not just Rahu there, but you also have Mars. Let me see. 1, 2, 3, 4. No, you don't have Mars there. Actually, yes, you do. Wait. See, according to this video that I saw, so this guy pretended to resuscitate her. So she had overdosed, all right? So she had, or she was unconscious, basically, when this guy arrived at the scene. Not just him and someone else. And she was unconscious because she had taken too many pills. So that's the Rahu there. You see the Rahu. I talked about how Rahu signifies poisons, intoxications. I also mentioned this in another video, that if you have Rahu connected to the circumstances of death, don't go crazy on, taking sleeping pills and combining them with other substances, and, don't abuse pills, don't abuse drugs, because these could become your cause of demise, basically. So that's the Rahu energy, the overdose. But what was also said in that video was that this guy basically stabbed her, basically murdered her by breaking her rib or pushing down a syringe in her heart or something like that. So, like I said, this video in particular, this documentary that I saw, was really creepy. And again, it's almost impossible to know for sure what happened, because it happened so long ago. People didn't speak about it. And if she was truly murdered, right, probably there were a lot of people who were silenced, like nobody would have wanted to talk about it. But apparently there were reasons to have her murdered, because she, before her death, mentioned to an acquaintance that she was going to speak to the press about having an affair with Kennedy, who was married, of course, and was the president. So it would have really affected his image, his career, and all of that. Even though there were probably already rumors that she was having an affair, it would have been a totally different thing if she had just, started to blab about everything, and also not just the president, but also his brother or something like that. So there are reasons to believe, and it is actually shown by her Arudha Lagna circumstances of death, that she may have been murdered, actually, because you have Rahu there, yes, but then the ruler of the third house from the Arudha Lagna is Mercury, and Mercury is conjunct the sun in the second house. And then you have Mars aspecting Mercury and the sun from the 11th. So by fourth aspect, you have 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah. So I have mentioned this in Circumstances of Death, the videos that I did, that Mars can show mechanical incidents, causes of death. Mars can show especially things, objects piercing the body, violent death, wrongful death, basically. So you would expect Mars to be connected to, I don't know, someone having a car crash or being stabbed or, stuff like that. So this story about a guy, pushing down a syringe through her heart made sense, or like through her rib cage or something. Would have made sense, actually, going hand in hand with these circumstances of death. And also the sun being there shows that the cardiovascular system is the main thing, the main part that goes out, So you have the sun and Mercury, by the way. Mercury is about the respiratory system, and the sun is about the heart and the cardiovascular system. And according to circumstances of death, basically what was said in this documentary is very plausible. It is possible that someone murdered her, but it's impossible to know 100%, like I said, because it happened a long time ago. But these are the influences that are shown. Aside from this, you do have a little bit of Jupiter as well, because Jupiter is in conjunction to Mars, but Jupiter is also aspecting the third house by fifth. And this is also interesting because, according again to rumors, there were some rumors where she was actually nervous that something might happen to her. And Jupiter aspecting the third from the Arudha Lagna, a benefic in general being aspecting the Arudha Lagna, can show that you might become aware of your demise before it happens. So, again, I'm not saying that she was murdered, but I'm not saying she wasn't murdered either. So I would actually find it more plausible that what was said in this documentary actually happened than just believing that she died of an overdose. Because if she would, an accidental overdose, or the way that they said suicide, all right? Because yes, by the way, Rahu also being connected to the circumstances of death is one of those placements that can show not just suicide, but sudden death. It shows it happens all of a sudden, as opposed to, let's say, someone who dies of a long-lasting disease, right? When you have Rahu connected to the circumstances of death, it can show that it's going to happen overnight. It's going to happen, I don't know, an accident or something like that. So it is plausible. However, it wouldn't make sense with the rest of the energies, having Mars influencing, having Sun influencing. The Sun and Mercury again would make sense, but the Mars being there, that's my main question mark, because like I said, Mars can often show wrongful death, and it can show death of a mechanical problem, a physical mechanical problem, or it can also show a problem connected to the blood if you can stretch it a little bit, right? Or maybe the sex organs as well. But when I have seen so far, and I have looked at quite a few horoscopes, when you see Mars there, there's often some kind of accident happening, unless there's like a strong Saturn to overpower the Mars, which in this case, you don't see this, right? Unless there's like a strong Saturn, like if you have, let's say, Saturn in the third from the Arudha Lagna, and then you also have Mars aspecting the ruler of the third from the Arudha Lagna, then it could go either way. Like maybe this person could die from leukemia or something, because Mars does show blood stuff, blood, muscles, and sex organs as well, but more the mechanical side of sex organs, as opposed to hormones and stuff. So yeah, it could go either way, but in this situation, it really kind of leads more towards the explanation that she died of foul play. So yeah, again, you can draw whichever conclusion you want, but I remember from the time that I actually watched that documentary, I immediately searched her circumstances of death, and I remember thinking, I don't know, something is really fishy here. So, whatever. I mean, obviously, if she was murdered, may she rest in peace, and her potential murderers probably got what they deserved. If not in this lifetime, then in future lifetimes. So, yeah, but this is pretty much my analysis, and I hope that you have enjoyed it. And if you have, please don't forget to like the video and subscribe to my channel. It will only take a second and it is free. And also click the notifications bell if you want to see when I will post a new video. And also, if you're interested in a private consultation, I do consultations on a wide variety of topics. Check out the video description. I will leave my contact information there. And also, please comment in the comment section with any feedback you would like to give, any questions you have on this topic. Yeah, I would be very curious to hear your feedback. All right. And again, once again, if you are interested in tarot, check out the video description and the pinned comment, because I will link my tarot channel there. If you're interested, maybe go ahead, check it out, maybe subscribe. I would greatly appreciate it. All right. So thank you.